We're gonna pick a random product from the Amazon search page, and then we're going to model, texture, and animate this in Blender. If you do this right, you might be able to convince the company to pay us some money in exchange for more footage like this. If you like this tutorial, then check out my Blender ebook, the link is below. First of all, we're going to need some reference images. Since this is such a simple object, we're only going to need a front view image and a back view image. We have a good front view image right here on the product Amazon page, so we can just click that, right click, save image as, and I made a new folder where I'm going to save all the reference images and all the textures and all the other shit that I'm gonna need for this project. So we're going to name this front view. Then to get some more reference images, we're going to copy the name of this product, paste that into Google image search, and it won't be long before you find a picture of the back of this product. Now keep in mind there are multiple variations of this product. This is the second generation. Right now we're talking about the third generation, which is this one over here. The third generation looks more simple from the back, so that means less work for me. Right click, save image as, and also save this in the same folder as rear view. We're not really gonna need any more reference images for this. If we need to check the features such as these knobs over here, we can just open a picture like this, and here we can see everything. Now we have to load up these reference images into Blender. So to do that, we're first going to go to front view by pressing 1 on the number pad, then press Shift A, image, reference. Find the folder where you got the references saved, and I'm first going to load the rear view image because the front view image is not an orthographic projection, and the rear view image is going to do a better job at showing us the dimensions, so the height and the width of this object. As you can see, we're looking at this from an angle, so there's going to be some perspective distortion. Delete the default cube, Shift A and add a new cube, scale that cube down to align it with the reference like this, and then scale it up on the x-axis to match the width in the reference. We're gonna throw this reference image in the background to get it out of the way. Then in edge select mode, select these 4 edges right here. If you're in vertex select mode, this is not going to work because then you're also gonna select these edges. We only want these edges. Go back to front view, press B to bevel, and then scroll up to add more segments to this bevel. Don't overdo it because you're gonna have some problems. I'm going to use something like 8 segments, and this width right here works for me. I also don't have a top view image which is going to tell me the exact length of this object, but as we speak my camera is sitting on top of one of these, so I can tell that it's approximately this thick. I measured this with my fingers and I figured out that it's a little bit more than 2 times wide than it is high. So press S to scale this, Y to scale on the y-axis, and type in something like 2.2. This is more or less right. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm just doing this for the tutorial. You're probably just doing this for your portfolio. If you're doing this for real, then you're gonna wanna do some Googling to get some right measurements. Or if this company actually hired you, they better send you some blueprints. Go back to front view, select this face, and in wireframe mode, we're going to inset this face with eye. And this new edge loop, which we just inset, has to match with the inner part here, so the inside of this red frame. Then with this face selected, press B, separate it to a new object. In edit mode, take this edge loop on the inside of this frame, extrude, right click, and move that inwards on the y-axis. Then take these 2 edge loops over here and Control B to bevel them. We want a small bevel, something like this. It doesn't have to have 8 segments. We can probably get away with something like 5 or even 4. Then select this frame object, go to Object, Shade Smooth, place a loop cut around this shape so we can delete the backside. Then add a loop cut like this and bring it very close to this bevel, but make sure that it doesn't merge with this edge loop here. Make another loop cut over here with Control R and press Control B to bevel that. Scroll down so that you only have 2 segments, and again bring it very close to the other edge loops like this. This is just going to slightly improve the shading around these bevels. Then take this face which we separated a moment ago, extrude it inwards slightly. You can delete the face in the back because we don't need that. Right now this face looks a bit weird because the normals are inverted. So in edit mode, select all the geometry and press Shift N to correct the normals. Then select this edge loop, Control B, add a tiny bevel right here with 2 segments and set the shape to 1. Again go Object, Shade Smooth, and now we got some nicer shading around these edges as well. In face select mode, select the face in the front here, delete that face, then press Ctrl R, place a loop cut right here in the middle, set the number of cuts to 44, do the same thing down here, Ctrl R, 44, and double click, and then over here on the sides we're going to add a loop cut, and that's gotta have only 10 cuts. Zoom in, select this inner edge loop, go to face, grid fill. You're gonna have to play around with these properties until you get something that works well. In my case, a span of 23 works, and you might have to adjust the offset so this aligns better. Now let's pull out the front view reference so we can see the details here. Even though the dimensions dimensions are not exactly the same, we can tell approximately where the features are. So we're going to use this geometry which we just created in the front of this face to create these circular holes and other features. So select an area around this hole, for example, press I to inset, then go W, loop tools, circle. And if you don't have your loop tools active, go up here to edit, preferences, add-ons, type in loop, and check this add-on right here. If W doesn't work for you, you can also press N in edit mode to open this menu on the side. Find the edit menu, and you got loop tools right here. You can just click on circle while you have a surface selected, and it's going to turn it into a circle. Scale this down to align it with this circle in the reference image. We can delete all the geometry on the inside because we won't need it. Shift D, right click to duplicate this circle, scale it down a little, extrude, right click, scale it down a bit further, and now we can delete these faces. That's going to give us this ring around the outside of this hole. Then once again, take the circle from the outside, Shift D, right click, scale it down, and that's where we're gonna have these features over here. This is where you plug in the microphone on this interface. Fill this, extrude it inwards. Also take this ring and extrude it inwards. You can delete the faces on the back. Also take this edge loop, extrude, right click, and push it backwards on the y-axis. Select this edge loop, Control B to bevel it slightly. When you bevel this, again, make sure you got two segments in the shape of one on this bevel, and uncheck loop slide to shape the geometry a little bit better. Over here, we got some twisting on the faces, so we're gonna select this edge loop. With double G, we're gonna slide this back and forth a little bit. That's just going to organize the geometry a little bit better. Delete the face in the front here, go to face, grid fill, and again, we're going to use the geometry from this surface to create these holes here. Inset, loop tools, circle, delete faces, adjust the size of this lower circle to make it match the others. Extrude, right click, push this inwards, bevel this. Also bevel this edge with one segment and make a smaller bevel on the outside of this new bevel. Select all the sharp edges on this ring, Control B to bevel them. Select these shapes, P to separate them to new object, and we're going to add a subdivision surface modifier to this new object. Object, shade smooth, and that's good to go. These other details we can add with a normal map later on. We're gonna need two more holes, one over here and one over here. So again, select the surrounding geometry, inset, W, loop tools, circle. I'm doing both at the same time, so I'm gonna have to scale these down with individual origins. Then just extrude this backwards. Take these two edge loops, Shift D, right click, scale, extrude, right click, scale down further. Take the face loops and extrude them inwards. I'm also going to bevel the surrounding geometry like this, and it looks like I'll just need three more holes for these little buttons down here. This will be the same. Inset, loop tools, circle, scale, align, extrude inwards, bevel this, and in the next section we're gonna add the features which protrude from this surface. So those will be the buttons and the knobs and whatever else we got over here. Now we have to create three things here. We have this knob right here, then we have this button, and finally this big knob on the side. For these two, we just have to create one and we can duplicate it. Select this face, Shift S to place the 3D cursor right here, then go to Shift A, mesh, circle, align that with view, and then scale it down. Now extrude, right click, and scale down further to make the green part here. Push that outwards a little. Add an extra loop cut like this, which we're going to scale up, push outwards a little bit more, because this is supposed to be kind of round like this. Then duplicate this circle and separate it to new object. Scale that up slightly, extrude that outwards, and scale it down a bit more. Then fill it and inset it a little bit like this. Take these four faces, I to inset, check edge rail, and this is going to be this white line over here. I want this to be a straight line. Give me K for knife tool, click right here, follow the Z axis by pressing Z and bring it up here. Slide this vertex and do the same thing on the other side. Then go M and merge by distance. Slide these edges inwards like this so that this turns into more of a straight line. Then slide these vertices forwards a little bit and lift these up. Select this surface, extrude, right click, Alt S to deflate this. Check even offset. And now we can add a subdivision surface modifier. Select all these sharp edges and we're going to bevel those with Control B. Then I'm just gonna add a supporting loop here to control this shape. Also give me a subdivision surface modifier back here to make this look a bit cuter. Now we can join these into the same object, then Shift D to duplicate it and bring the other one over here. I just need a tiny cylinder to fill this hole here, so I can just use this circle, scale it down a bit and fill it, separate that to new object. It has to stick out a little bit like this, then just extrude it inwards. And since we're going to subdivide this face with a subdivision surface modifier, we might as well subdivide this one, which means we gotta delete the face in the back, bevel this, and to make UV mapping easier, we're gonna delete this face and replace the n-gon with a grid fill. To accurately place this in the other holes, select the outline of this hole here, Shift S cursor to select it, then select this button object, go to object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Now place the 3D cursor on this other outline here, then duplicate this with Shift D and go to Shift S, selection to cursor. That way you can very precisely place this in all the other holes. And finally we got this big ass button right here. So give me a circle with 256 vertices, flip that sideways, scale it down, fill, extrude outwards, select this face loop that goes around the cylinder, go up here to select, check or deselect, and with the pivot point both set to individual origins, press S to scale and Shift Y to exclude the Y-axis from scaling. That way we can make these faces a little bit wider. Now press I to inset these faces, extrude them all inwards slightly, and scale them down a little bit more. You can use Alt S to inflate or deflate this selection to control the depth of these ridges here. You can even turn these into bumps instead of holes if that's what you prefer. Then with these faces still selected, we're going to select one outline around the top, then go Shift G, select similar face angles, and we're going to bevel all the selected edge loops slightly. Make sure the shape is set to 1 and we got 2 segments. That's going to make the shading look a bit better. And now we just gotta extrude this outwards a little bit, extrude it again and scale it down. Give me a bevel here. Fill this face in the front, and now we just have to figure out a way to make this little line here. So we can delete this face, take a few edges, extrude, right click and lower them down like this. Then we can select all the other geometry on the inside of this hole, extrude, right click, push it outwards a bit, place the 3D cursor in the middle of this shape, select only the outer circle, not this geometry in the middle, and scale that down by pressing S and Shift Y to exclude the Y-axis. Then we can just fill this with an N-GOM because I don't give a shit about the topology right now. We're going to bevel these edges to improve the shading here. Shape has to be 1. And now we got this knob ready to go. Before we start texturing, let's just quickly take care of the back of this object too. So we're gonna duplicate this front half, scale it to -1 on the Y-axis, correct the normals, merge everything by distance. Place the 3D cursor over here, duplicate this edge loop, scale to 0 on the Y-axis with the 3D cursor as a pivot point. Separate this, give me a bunch of loop cuts up here, down here, and on the sides. Then go face, grid fill the same way we did before. And now we can just use our reference to figure out where we're supposed to place these features. First of all, we got some holes here. We already learned how to do this. Inset, loop tools, circle and scale them down. Inset again, extrude this out a little bit, extrude, right click, scale down, then extrude inwards, and we're also going to extrude this inwards. Select these edge loops and bevel them, and these are now ready. Over here we got the same shit except it's a rectangular shape, so we're going to inset this, but we're not going to turn it into a circle. To improve the geometry, I'm going to select these 2 edge loops, loop tool, space. Now all the edges here have the same length. Do the same shit with the horizontal edge loops. Inset slightly, inset again, extrude these 2 surfaces in, pull this out. You can delete the faces at the bottom of these holes, then bevel this, and finally down here we got some kind of little USB port. That's the same thing as this thing up here. And then it's up to you if you want to waste your time adding a bunch of these tiny little features on the inside of this USB port. Probably no one's gonna notice this. Most likely this is not even gonna be visible, but if you want to do some cool close-up shots, then this is gonna help you. Once we got all the features ready, we're gonna place this on the back of the interface, and now the model is complete. We just gotta add some textures. Let's talk about the textures that we need to prepare for this model. The front surface texture here can just be a black image with some simple white or colored text. We're also gonna have to draw up these little icons on that surface. Up here we got a logo on a red surface. The back is basically the same shit as the front, and we're going to need to make 2 normal maps for this. One normal map is going to consist of some letters and numbers for this microphone socket, and the other normal map is gonna give us this circular texture for the knobs and buttons. I'm gonna copy this picture from Google. I'll paste that into PaintNet, then I'll add a new layer on top of that, and on that new layer I'm going to draw these letters or whatever icons we have on this surface. So give me my text tool, white color, Arial font, and we're just going to start writing these letters on top of the reference image in the back. I'm going to take a screenshot of the front of my model in orthographic projection, then I'll paste that into PaintNet, and now I just have to look at a reference image which is going to show me the various text and the various symbols and icons that we have on this object. And by looking at my screenshot, I'll be able to tell exactly where I have to place these. So give me a new layer above this. Text tool, white font Arial. Down here it says gain. Over here we also got gain. Then up here it says monitor. Direct monitor over here. And then we got a tiny number 1 over here and a number 2 on the other side. We're also gonna need some little lines around these knobs like this. I'm not trying to get sued, so I'm going to make a spin-off here. My audio interface is going to be named like this. I found this USB icon on Google, but that has to be green, and we're going to paste that on a new layer because we're going to use this as an emission map. This shit is supposed to glow in the dark. On that same new layer, we're going to create this colored text. This is also supposed to glow in the dark. So give me 48V and INST in red text. Then in orange text, we gotta write air. I also want this little headphone shit down here. So give me a little white circle, delete the lower part, and now we're just going to draw up a little earphone manually. Place that down here, copy it to the other side, and now I'll place the image with the white text on top of a black background, flatten that, and save that as color map. Then give me the color text on top of a black background. This has to be called emission map. On a red background, we're going to write fuck us right. Save this image as logo. I also made this texture for the back off camera, and we're going to quickly draw up a bump map which we're going to be able to use for the microphone input. To do that, I'm just going to need some black text on a white background, then go effects, stylize, normal map, and now I can apply that to the microphone input. And then I'm going to use a gradient to create a circular pattern like this. We're also going to turn this into normal map and save this to circle normal map. Now let's quickly apply these materials to this object. First, let's create a red material for the frame. Make this metallic. I want an image texture node. Here, I'm going to load up the logo. Select the two faces at the top, you unwrap them, and adjust the UV map so this is placed correctly. Then add a noise texture node, color ramp node. Connect those two nodes and plug the color from the color ramp node into the roughness. Crank up the scale and adjust the colors in the color ramp node so that we get this kind of spotted roughness map here. Then add a new material to the front surface. Name that face. Load the color map into this material, and then we just gotta UV map this properly so that the text aligns with the model. Add a new material for the microphone, load up the mic normal map into that material, set that image to non-color, give me a normal map node, plug color into color and normal into normal. This obviously has to be black, and then we're going to UV unwrap this surface in the front, adjust the UV map over here in the UV editor, and that worked out pretty well. Then we just need some basic materials for these knobs. We're gonna start with a simple black plastic material for this, then add a simple white material to this inner line, and this little shape in the back has to have a new material, and that material has to be green. Set the emission color to green, and now this is going to glow in the dark. Duplicate the green material, and instead of green, we're going to make that red. Now we just need to apply the circular normal map to these buttons and this knob. So give me a new material called circle. Pull out the circle normal map, non-color, give me a normal map node again. Connect that shit. I want a black color and I want this to be metallic. Now UV unwrap this. Make sure that the middle is aligned exactly with the center here. And then scale this UV map to control how large or small you want these circles to be. I think this works quite well. Now we're just gonna duplicate this button and place it on all the other locations. And finally, we gotta color this knob here. We're also gonna load the circle material to this. Only unwrap the front face, align that with the middle, and then adjust the size again. This looks pretty good. Invert the selection with Control I. Add a new material slot and also load up the circle. Duplicate that material. We're going to name that black metal. And in that duplicated material, just get rid of the normal map and also load up the white line material for this part. Give me a material for the rear color map, color into color. We're gonna mark seams around the features here. Then select this surface, you unwrap, and just adjust the UV map until this looks about right. On the face material, we're also going to load up our emission map. Plug the color from that into the emission color. This is already UV mapped. The only difference is that now this little text here is going to glow in the dark. And before we start animating this, let's quickly add some black cylinders to the bottom. I shaped this as a little leg. I'm gonna place it in the corner, copy it to the other side like this, and then also bring it to the back. That's it, the model's ready. Now let's make an animation for this. Here's an easy and simple way to render this object. First, create a circle, scale that circle up so it's really big, extrude it up to about here, delete the ceiling, bevel this part, go to Object, Shade Smooth, and then press 1 to go to front view and Control Alt 0 to align your camera with your view. In the center of the world, which is also hopefully the center of this object, go to Shift A, empty, plane axes, and then parent the camera to this new empty object. With the 3D cursor in the middle of the world and the 3D cursor as a pivot point, rotate this camera around the X-axis so it's somewhere above the scene like this, and we're going to rotate the empty so the camera is in this position. I'm going to press G to move the camera and double Z to pull it backwards on its local Z axis, and now I'm going to add a new area light, place it above the scene. I want it to be large. I'm going to scale it up until it's about this big and set the strength to something like 600. Jump over to the shading workspace and switch from object to world. Add an environment texture node and plug that into color. Google Polyhaven, go to HDRIs, and now find an environment image which would be suitable for this purpose. This bathroom looks like it'll be quite cool. The reflections are going to be more or less colorless, and the shading and the reflections are going to be soft. So download that, press open on the environment texture node, and load up this image which we just downloaded. I also want the ground to be a bit more reflective, so I'm going to add a new material for the ground and reduce the roughness a little bit. I'll set my resolution to 512 by 512 just so I can get a quick preview. Set the samples to something like 64 and hit F12 to render this. While this is rendering, we're going to think about whether if you were somebody else, Would you want to be friends with yourself? My ground is a little bit too shiny, so I'm going to increase the roughness a bit. And once we tweak a couple of things, for example, the placement of the lights, I made 4 smaller lights instead of 1 big light. Then I'm going to set my resolution to 1920 by 1080p, set the number of render samples to 128, and then let's move over to the animation workspace. Select this empty to which the camera is parented, press I to keyframe the rotation. In your timeline, place your marker to frame 0, select this empty in the middle, press I and keyframe the rotation. Then move over to something like frame 140 and rotate this to different positions such as back here. And once again keyframe the rotation over here. Select both the keyframes with A, or you can use your box select tool, press T and set the interpolation to linear. Now the camera is going to rotate around the scene, and that's going to look pretty good once we render the animation. And I'm gonna have to render this in cycles, because if I render this in Eevee, there will be no reflections, which is going to make this surface look pretty unrealistic. So since we got 140 frames, this is gonna take about 3 years to render. Here's how you calculate the amount of time it's going to take to render this. I've got all my settings set up. Resolution is 1080, 128 samples. We're going to render 1 frame by pressing F12, and it says up here in the corner that this 1 frame took 2 minutes and 15 seconds to render. So that's 128 plus 15 seconds, 135 seconds, multiplied in this case 141 frames. That's 19,035 seconds. Divide that by 60, that's 317 minutes. Divide that by another 60, that's 5.5 hours. Now I would recommend you render this in a full circle, which means this animation is gonna take at least twice as much. So unless you got a supercomputer in the back, you're gonna want to render this shit overnight. Otherwise, you can render this in Eevee, then it's gonna look like Minecraft, and you're probably not gonna get paid very well that way. Alternatively, I heard from Thomas Colin 3D that you can use a rendering farm online. Go ask him about that, because that can probably make your renders at least 10 times faster. Once you're ready to render, go down here to output properties, set the file format to FFmpeg video, open up encoding, set the container to MPEG-4, make sure the video codec is H.264, that means MP4, all this other shit is good, and then just select the destination folder. Make sure that you cropped the animation properly. In my case, my animation only lasts 141 frames. I just want a quick preview so I can show you guys in this video. You can also adjust your frame rate up here. I'm gonna set mine to 30 because that's what I'm gonna be editing this video at. But keep in mind that this is going to make your animation play faster. Once everything is ready, go up here to render and hit render animation. And while this is cooking, your computer is most likely gonna be out of service. So do this when you're going to bed or something. If you got any questions, then join my Discord. The link is below. We're about to hit 2,000 people in there. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.